to and then we'll get started, but thanks for being here. Hey, folks that have just joined us, we're going to give folks just one more minute to hop on, and then we'll go ahead and get started, but thanks for being here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Polly Kyle. I'm the Housing Prioritization Policy Officer here with the Department of Housing Stability. And today we are talking about the prioritization policy. So we'll just a note of how we'll run today. We have a presentation, but we'll also be asking for some polling throughout that you can do on your computer or your phone, and we'll get those details to you in the chat. We do have a Q&A function that you can ask questions, and then at the end we'll answer all those questions, and we'll take folks off mute and allow people to ask questions here. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is HOST? In October of 2019, Mayor Hancock signed an executive order. That order brought together the affordable housing development functions from Denver Economic Development and Opportunity and the homeless resolution programs from Denver Human Services and brought them into one department. We work to invest resources, create policy, and partner to provide housing stability and resolve episodes of homelessness and create more housing opportunities for Denverites. How do we do our work? We are guided by our overarching core value of equity. And to us, that means that race no longer predicts housing outcomes, and our work is trauma-informed, data-driven, and person-centered. We have 3 pillars to our work, and we have structured our organization into these divisions. We have housing stability, and that's how we keep people in their homes and create stability, such as rent and utility assistance. We have homelessness resolution, which is how we manage and resolve episodes of homelessness. This includes outreach, shelter services, and supportive housing. And then we have housing opportunity, and this is how we create more affordable housing. So affordable housing development, long-term affordable home ownership, and land trusts. All of these pillars are supported by our operations team, which provides the foundation for everything that we do. So we've got some affordable housing resources. This is how we do our work through several different funding streams. We've got the Affordable Housing Fund, that's $30 million annually. We have the Homelessness Resolution Fund, which was approved by voters. That was 2B, and that's $40 million annually. In November of 2021, voters also approved Denver's most recent bond, the $260 million RISE Denver bond, which was the culmination of months of community engagement to identify priorities of interest. And about 38.6 million of that will go to housing. And then we also have some COVID response dollars, so 10.8 million, and then ARPA funds are 308 million total to the city, with 28 million as affordable housing fund match. We're also collaborating with our partners at Metro DPA, which is a home loan and down payment assistance program that Host provides funding for, and we're doing a new social equity program. Social equity, which just launched last week, aims to help increase home ownership in communities of color, where they've been historically targeted by discriminatory lending practices like redlining. Residents who were displaced or who are a descendant from someone who was displaced from a historically redlined neighborhood in Denver can qualify for additional down payment assistance through Metro DPA. And to get more information about that, you can head to that website, which is just denvergov.org/Metro DPA. Host is also working with our colleagues over at Community Planning and Development on the expanding housing affordability proposal to help residents find housing they can afford. The city is proposing that as new housing is built, new affordable housing must be created along with it. There's several components to this. We've completed a really lengthy period of engagement. And the proposal is in the city council process right now, and the proposal will go before the full city council on June 6th for a hearing and a vote. Now, here are some of Host's 2022 priorities. We're really focusing on that last one tonight, which is advance critical policies that increase affordable housing supply and address involuntary displacement, including the prioritization policy. So we're going to get to our first poll, and you can go, she's going to pop this in the chat, and you can also go to www.menti.com and use the code 89450418. And that's, and while we're doing that, I'll answer this first question, which is addressed to the expanding housing affordability proposal, which I did breeze right past because it's not our focus for tonight. But it will require new residential development of 10 units or more to designate between 8 and 12% of units as affordable, regardless if the home is for rent or for sale. So it'll apply to both rental and for sale options.
And if anybody is looking for that direct link to the poll, it is in the Q&A. If you click on Q&A and the answered questions, you will find that link.
And we'll just give folks a minute here to let us know what district you're from. Get to know you a little bit. And if you don't know your district, that's fine. We'll have other opportunities for you to participate. So no need to stress if you're not able to answer this question. We'll just give a couple more seconds and then we'll move forward. So we've got some folks, District 9, 10, 2, and 3. Oh, one more in District 6. Great. We've got, you know, some good representation throughout the city, which is always great to see. I know we have many more people on the call as well. So that's great. So our next question will move forward is, have you seen or experienced gentrification in your neighborhood? And this is a scale, so you can rank it from you haven't seen any gentrification in your neighborhood to you've seen a great deal of gentrification in your neighborhood. And this will just roll around as we get answers submitted.
Holly, do you want to give people just like a quick overview of what gentrification is?
Yep, I can do that. So when an area experiences gentrification, this is when housing costs go up, property values increase, neighborhoods experience both negative and positive impacts. And while increasing property values can be a benefit to some, they also force some residents and business out of the area, which is called involuntary displacement. So gentrification and involuntary displacement are a little different, but are related. I'll give just 2 more seconds for this, and then we'll move on through the presentation. All right, let's keep going. So housing cost burden. So citywide rents and mortgages have been increasing dramatically and incomes are not keeping up. Today, more than 115,000, which is 1 in 3 Denver households, are housing cost burden. That means they spend more than 1/3 of their income on housing alone, and this puts them at risk of losing their homes. So as Denver experiences growth, residents in previously affordable neighborhoods have become susceptible to involuntary displacement. Our community has told us time and again that involuntary displacement of residents is a growing area of concern. And throughout the development of other affordable housing policy and plans, including HOST's 5-year strategic plan and the expanding housing affordability policy, the need for a policy to address involuntary displacement has been raised repeatedly. So we got another poll question, and this one is, do you feel like you understand what involuntary displacement is? And again, a scale from I don't know to I have a firm understanding. Just a couple more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and move on. All right, so what can we do about it? So to address this, HOST is proposing a prioritization policy that would provide households at risk of or who have been displaced from their neighborhood or from Denver priority access to newly developed or preserved affordable housing. Our goal for the prioritization policy is to help residents at risk of displacement remain in and help residents who have been displaced return to their neighborhoods and to Denver generally in affordable homes. Who's it likely to benefit? So people who are going to benefit have long-standing ties and deep roots to the Denver community, or they're struggling to keep up with rising housing costs, such as facing foreclosure, paying more than 40% of their income on housing, or they need to move because they're losing their housing through no fault of their own, like a no-cause eviction, renters who must leave because the property owners are selling or moving into the unit. So I'm going to do a quick rundown of how the policy works, and then we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty details. Residents will be able to sign up for notifications about affordable housing opportunities that meet their needs on a new user-friendly website that we're developing. The website's intended to support all new affordable housing as well as those prioritized units. So this website and data system will help developers and property managers connect with applicants, prioritize for affordable housing. We're working on the procurement of the system, and there's going to be additional opportunities to weigh in on how that system functions. And we're expected it to be live in late 2023. Property managers and developers will post their rental vacancies and new affordable for sale opportunities on that site. Units subject to the policy would be available for 14 days for residents to express interest. Property managers would prioritize residents at risk of or who have been displaced to express interest in the rental or for sale home. And if the resident meets the other requirements for the home, they could lease or buy that unit. So some of the details, the units that are required. So affordable rental units, the policy is going to apply to new and newly preserved affordable housing rental units, and that includes all city regulated affordable units. The city regulates units that receive city funds, are required through policy, such as the expanding housing affordability policy or negotiated agreements with the city. The policy will apply to mandatory housing when the building is a minimum of 100 units or any size building that's in an area vulnerable to displacement. And that mandatory housing is a term that comes from that expanding housing affordability policy, and mandatory housing is the mandatory affordable housing that must be built. The requirements will apply to initial lease-ups and subsequent lease-ups of the vacant units for the affordability period of the rental development. For affordable home ownership units, again, the policy would apply to newly built affordable home ownership units and would include those city regulated units. Again, that's city funds required through policy or are negotiated agreements with the city. The policy only applies to 100% affordable housing developments when it's 10 units or more. And the policy is only going to apply for the first sale and not on subsequent sales for that. And then mandatory housing is the same requirements that it is for rental. So buildings will be 100 units or more will be required to participate in the prioritization policy, or again, any sized building that's in an area vulnerable to displacement. So some policy details. So we are going to initiate a marketing period for the prioritized units. The policy will apply to for the first 14 days in which applications are taken. Property managers and sales teams must review applicants who apply under the prioritization policy first to identify eligible applicants. And if after 14 days, if no prioritized applicants are eligible, the units could be leased or sold to residents without prioritization status. That just means they don't have to hold the unit open, but there still will be a compliance factor to meet the requirements. And we're going to another poll. Let Katie's switch. And this again is a scale. So do you think the 14-day application window will provide enough time for prioritized applicants to express interest? We are from not enough time to too much time. And I'll give folks just a few minutes to fill that out. Give just a couple more seconds and then we'll keep moving forward. All right, looks like we've reached a critical mass. All right, let's move forward. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. It's got a big explanation to it. So some more policy details. 30% of units in those qualifying developments will be set aside for the prioritization policy. The legal standard for determining the percentage of units the policy applies to must be rationally related to the incidence of involuntary displacement in Denver. So to develop a rationally related standard, we reviewed existing data on housing needs and the prevalence of involuntary displacement. Like I said earlier, 115,000 households, which is 35% of all households in Denver, are experiencing housing cost burden, which is a primary indicator of housing instability. Additionally, 30% of city and county of Denver renters reported experiencing displacement, and that was identified in Metro Denver's analysis of fair housing impediment study. As both of these indicators demonstrate a similar proportion, we have determined that 30% as the rationally related percentage for the policy. So that's how we got to that 30% using a data-driven standard. One community, San Francisco, used a percentage that was selected without data-driven by city council, and this yielded an investigation by HUD. So to ensure that appropriateness of scale, we really believe it's important to maintain that data-driven standard, and this approach uses the best data available for that. So some more policy details. So the duration of the policy applicability, like I said, the affordable rental units will apply to initial lease-ups and subsequent lease-ups for the affordability period of rental developments. And for affordable homeownership, the policy requirements will only apply to first sale and not to subsequent sales. And for that compliance piece that I mentioned earlier, developers and property managers will be accountable for ultimately leasing units to prioritized households. And they would need to demonstrate that 30% of their units were occupied by prioritized households, and this will be measured and assessed at least every 3 years. And on the home ownership side, developers will need to demonstrate that 30% of their units were sold to prioritized households in those initial sales. So who can apply for this program? Our eligibility requirements are here. To be eligible for the program, applicants must have been displaced or at risk of displacement between 2000 and today, and or an applicant's family member was displaced from Denver between 1939 and 2000. So I'll just stick there for another couple of seconds, read that one more time, let it soak in. We do have a question after this, but so to be eligible for the program, these are folks that are looking to be prioritized for affordable housing. They must have been displaced or at risk of displacement between 2000 and today, and or an applicant's family member was displaced from Denver between 1939 and 2000. And with that, we'll go to our next poll question, which is, are these eligibility requirements clear to you? Least understanding to most understanding. All right, maybe this will clear up too as we talk a little bit more about it, discuss what displacement means, and define that. So we'll go ahead and move on. Thanks to Katie for doing all the switching of the screens back and forth and powering the PowerPoint. I really appreciate it. Makes life a lot easier to present, so thank you. So displacement qualifications. So this is a list that we've come up with. with community involvement as well. Several of these came directly from the community engagement that has happened up to this point on the policy. And the causes of displacement and vulnerability will include the rent or mortgage is more than 40% of the household income. A renter must move because the property owner is selling or has sold a unit or is moving into the unit. A no-cause eviction, eviction for non-payment of rent, foreclosure, costly code violations, eminent domain, and red line neighborhoods. We'll go to the next slide. And this is our scoring criteria. This is how we're going to determine how at risk folks are of displacement or have already been displaced. And I'll go through and explain each one of these and why we're prioritizing these particular factors. So number one is broken down into length of time that has been spent in Denver. This is really honoring folks that have a long-standing ties to the community, have really established their community, their church, their schools. They've been here for a while, and there's up to 20 points that individuals can be awarded for this. There's 10 points if they've been here for 5 to 9 continuous years, an additional 5 points if they've been here for 10 to 14, and another additional 5 points if they've been here for 15 or more years. Number 2 is really focusing at neighborhood displacement, wanting to keep people in their neighborhoods. So folks must be displaced or at risk of displacement from a neighborhood where they have lived for at least 5 years and where affordable housing is being built. Displaced, 3, oh, looks like we have a double there. So number 4 is really getting at our parents, our generational displacement, folks that did not have the opportunity to stay in Denver. And that's a parent, grandparent, or primary guardian was displaced from a Denver neighborhood. That's an additional 5 points. Number 5 is kind of the ultimate form of displacement. Folks are currently doubled up in housing or they're experiencing homelessness. Doubled up in housing means individuals are couch surfing, they don't have secure housing of their own. Number 6 is an applicant or a member of the household has a disability. We know that individuals with disability are more likely to be displaced. And then number 7, the child in the household is eligible to be in Denver public schools, and that's an additional 2 points as well. We know that individuals with long-standing individuals with large families are more likely to be displaced as well. So this is another place to get at that. So we'll leave that up for a second before we go to our next question, which is this scoring system clear? It's obviously a lot of words, a lot of points, but does it make sense? Is what we're prioritizing feel appropriate? And this will be least understanding to most understanding, and we'll go ahead and go to that poll now.
Holly, while we have folks answering the poll, we do have one clarifying question on this scoring piece before we move on to the next part. So happy to flag that now or wait until folks have time to finish putting in their answers to this question.
I'm happy to clarify while folks are putting in their answers.
Awesome. So we have a question. Will folks be prioritized for units that are in the neighborhood they currently reside in or used to reside in if they were displaced? So revisiting that neighborhood piece a little bit.
Yeah. So yes. So if affordable housing is being built, so let's use 5 points as an example. If someone is currently living in 5 points, they're vulnerable to displacement, or someone has already been displaced from 5 points and they want to return. If there's affordable housing being built in that neighborhood, they get additional points to be prioritized for 30% of those units in the affordable housing developments. So yes, one of the goals of this policy is to keep people in their neighborhoods or get them back into their neighborhoods if they've already been displaced.
Holly, I'm going to pop the scoring criteria back up on the screen, but I just want to let folks know you can continue to answer that poll question, even if this is currently on the Zoom screen. You can continue answering that question.
And why don't also maybe we go to our examples, and I'll talk through some examples for folks of how this looks in application. So we've got our folks here. The first example, number one, these individuals have been Denver residents for 26 years. They live in a neighborhood where an affordable housing development is being built, and there's a disability in the household. These folks would receive 27 points. Number two, he's been a Denver resident for 5 years. He has generational ties to a neighborhood, and he also has a disability, so he would receive 17 points. And number three, this family has been a Denver resident for 11 years. They're currently doubled up in housing, and they have children in school, and that they would receive 20 points. So those are just some examples of how the points could shake out amongst individuals. All right, so timeline, we're collecting public input now. Thank you for being here and providing that input and asking questions. We're hoping to go to City Council this summer. We have to build out this data system to help us implement this policy, as well as have a place for folks to really have a centralized spot for affordable housing in Denver. And we're expecting implementation of the policy and that data system in late 2023. And we'll have more information about that implementation too as we move forward with finding a vendor to build out that data system and understand those capacities as well. So I think we'll take Q&A before we go to the next couple of questions. All right, so I will go through and answer some of these that have come in through the Q&A. Thanks for putting your questions in there. So the first question is, how do residents find the website? Great question. There will be hopefully City Council passes this. We'll have time between the passage of the policy and the implementation of the policy, and we expect to take that time to really educate individuals about the website. It will also be able to be found on our website. And we're hoping to educate housing navigators, nonprofits, the general public as well on how to access this website so that they can be prioritized and have these move forward. The next question is, will these be for LIHTC projects? Like I said before, the projects that will be applied are those that have city fingers in them, for lack of a better term. So if we're funding them, if they are part of mandatory housing, that expanding housing affordability policy, or if they're in negotiated agreements with the city, those properties will have to abide by the prioritization policy. If they are just a LIHTC project and they have no city involvement at all, the prioritization policy will not apply. Why is the time limitation so short? 14 days is a very short duration of time. So this is a hard one. We have gone back and forth many times on how to do a marketing period. Right now, there is no marketing period for any units in Denver. It is a first come, first served basis. People have to have the time to know when affordable housing is being listed, travel to different places to put in applications. We're trying to even the scales a little bit with this policy by instituting a 14-day marketing period for those prioritized units before they're released to the general public. So before folks that aren't vulnerable to displacement have access to them. We have gone from numbers all over the board and through public input and stakeholder input. 14 days has kind of been that middle ground that we've landed in. But certainly open to hearing more feedback on that. But just know that there has been a lot of input taken in from stakeholders and community members alike to end up at that 14 days. The next question is, what information would be required on the application? Great question. So we are trying to keep the barrier to entry very low. The application will require two pieces of information. The first is that you have to prove that you're vulnerable to displacement or that you have been displaced. You'll be able to do this a number of ways. One way is by very tangible evidence. You could provide a pay stub and a rent receipt that shows that you're paying more than 40% of your income on your rent. But we know from other programs that sometimes this really hard tangible evidence is hard to provide. So we will also we will have a form that non-familial contacts could fill out. So this could be a nonprofit, this could be a neighbor, someone that's connected to you that knows your situation that can say, hey, yes, this person was displaced because their landlord moved back into their unit and they had to move out of the neighborhood. So trying to keep the barrier to entry really low while also still maintaining some checks and balances. The other piece of information that will be required is proof of address. We've adopted a list out of Seattle, Seattle's program, which is 27, 28 different ways that folks can prove their address. So there's many ways, from a driver's license to food pantry records, an obituary, tons of different ways to prove your address. It's the most comprehensive list that's been proposed in like policies around. Everything else will be self-certification. So if you have a disability, you will just self-certify that, yes, I have a disability and I'm entitled to these points. So again, trying to keep the barrier to entry really low so that folks have an opportunity to come to the program and still have some checks and balances in place. All right, we've got another question. Would the 30% be all new developments, or are existing housing units included in that number? So it will be all new affordable housing and newly preserved affordable housing. It will not apply retroactively to affordable housing, but it will apply to all new and newly preserved affordable housing. What does stakeholder engagement look like between now and when it is voted on? We have done 4 stakeholder engagement meetings to date. This community meeting is happening now. I'm sussing out to see if there's interest for more community meetings, for more stakeholder engagement meetings. I'm happy to take one-on-one meetings to discuss the policy and to answer your questions and take your feedback. Happy to keep moving it forward. Like I said, we don't anticipate going to City Council until the summer, so we have some time to talk and get feedback for the policy. Another question, will applicants be able to save their application and apply for multiple units? If they're not approved for their first unit, can the application be referred to another opening? So yeah, so this is a great question, and this is really going to be part of the data system. But what we plan to do is have folks be able to kind of save a common application that has some just general information, family size, income, unit preference, those pieces, and that common application can be forwarded to additional openings as places become available. The other great part of the system that we are building is that when new units come online, folks will have had the ability to select preferences. So say you're looking for a 2-bedroom home, you could say, I want to be alerted of every 2-bedroom home that comes available on this site, and you'll get a ping notification letting you know that that new units are available that look like what you want, and then you can submit that application to them as an expression of interest to apply for the unit, and then that application will be saved, and you can continue to apply to other open units if you were not successful in getting that first unit. Another question here, can larger projects that grow through the state be required to provide extra spots? I'm thinking of the Barnum Years development, the property which is owned by CDOT at this time. I don't know if I completely understand your question, Felix. I'm sorry. Like I said, we are only applying to city enabled affordable housing. So things that are only part of the state will remain with the state. And this policy specifically won't be bringing additional affordable housing units online. It'll just be prioritizing those that come online. All right, another question. You mentioned all new affordable housing, which with city funding or requirements, but supportive housing for those exiting homelessness has specific ways of prioritizing the most vulnerable residents from that community, including those living unsheltered on the streets. So I'm assuming this does not apply to those buildings, and they will continue to be prioritized based on vulnerability and/or other requirements based on funding. That is correct. So supportive housing will be exempt from this particular process because like Robin said, they have their own process and system for getting the most vulnerable folks, including those that are currently living on the streets, into supportive housing. So this policy will exempt supportive housing from it. I'll give it a couple seconds. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, if folks would like to use the raise hand feature on Zoom and raise a hand, I can unmute you and you can ask a question if you were not able to get it into the Q&A.
And also welcome to keep using the Q&A if that's what's most comfortable for you. I'm happy to do whatever is best for you. Just a couple more teacher second pauses to allow folks to respond. And we do have 2 more polling questions for you that we'll move on to. Do we know how many units might be available when the policy comes online? We have an estimate, and Jennifer, I'm actually going to throw it to you. You're my numbers brain. If you wouldn't mind taking a stab at that one.
Ali, yeah, so this is a great question. As Polly said, this policy will apply to 30% of newly created and preserved affordable units. And the Department of Housing Stability in our 5-year strategic plan has a goal of creating and preserving at least 7,000 units over the next 5 years. Some of those will be supportive housing, which are exempted from this policy. But that could mean that up to 2,100 units would go through this policy.
Great. And then Bill asked if it'd be possible to get a searchable version of the plan. I think Katie's answering this one, typing in an answer for you on that. All right, well, let's move to, you can keep typing in questions if something comes to you, and we'll move to our last 2 poll questions. The first of the last 2 is, do you think this will help address involuntary displacement in your community? This will not help at all, to this will help a lot. And while folks are answering that poll, we've got someone asking if this site will act like an apartments.com for affordable housing in Denver, so you can see where the units are available. And yes, that is the goal, to have a very, very user-friendly site for folks to find affordable housing in Denver. So like I said, it is definitely going to help implement the prioritization policy, but it is also going to be a more user-friendly place, a one-stop shop place for folks to identify affordable housing. So I'll give it just a couple more seconds on this one before we go to our last poll question. All right, let's head to our last poll question. And this one is a word cloud, so you can type in your thoughts and feelings. But what are your general thoughts about the policy proposal that I presented to you all tonight? And I'll give a couple extra seconds to move your thumbs to type it out. Again, just want to take the time to say thank you for being here. This policy has really come from community. It's been many years in the making, and I'm really excited to hopefully be bringing it across the finish line. Like I said, I am happy to take additional feedback and comments. I'm going to pop, well, can I? Katie, can you pop my email into the Q&A so folks have that? Happy to take additional feedback, hear more questions. I am available. We've got important and equitable, progressive. Oh, thank you. Creating slide decks on the fly. Thanks. So yeah, comments, questions, email me, polly.kyle@denvergov.org. I love to hear from you all and hear your thoughts. All right, let's go back to the Menti poll and see how folks are feeling about the policy proposal. All right. Well, again, thank you for being here. Again, my email is open, my figurative door is open and would be happy to have more conversations. I know we're scheduled to go to 7, but I am always a fan of ending meetings early that don't need to continue on. So happy to end us here. But again, thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.